Hello, everyone. This is David Zern with Avalara. Welcome to today's webinar, the End of the Year Compliance Roundup, Hot DTC Topics and Tips. DTC compliance is already difficult, but with new laws coming into effect all the time, it can be even harder to know what your company should or shouldn't be doing when it comes to compliance. 2020 is coming up soon, so we gathered a few compliance experts to help explain what you should expect for next year. On today's webinar, we have Jeff Carroll, Kimberly Frost, and Annie Bones. Jeff is Director of Product for Beverage Alcohol here at Avalara and an expert in all things compliance. To help him out here today, we're excited to have special guests Kimberly from Martin Frost & Hill, a Texas liquor law firm, and Annie from the Wine Institute. Before we jump in, I wanted to go over a few basics of ways you can interact with us during today's webinar. First, we are recording today's webinar. So if you want to listen to it again or even share it with a colleague, you'll receive the recording within the next 24 hours. I also wanted to review the orange screen you're looking at. First, any and all of the windows can be completely customized. Feel free to move or resize any of them. Along the bottom of the screen, you'll see several buttons or widgets. I won't go over all of them, but did want to highlight a few. The first is the purple Q&A. We have some time set aside at the end of the presentation to have Jeff, Kimberly, and Annie answer questions provided during the presentation. Feel free to submit questions at any time. I will answer the ones that I can, normally of a logistical nature. The ones for our experts will be answered during Q&A by the team at the end of the presentation. Any questions they do not get to, we will try and answer via email after the webinar. The next button is the green Resources button. We've included a list with some additional pieces of content on the different topics we'll be discussing today. I normally tell people to click on the links that interest you and leave them open in a separate window so they'll be waiting for you after the presentation. You can also download today's presentation slides there. Also, there is a yellow Help button. If you have any technical issues with volume or any of the windows, you can get frequently asked questions there. While you're checking out the additional resources and getting yourself acquainted with the layout, I wanted to quickly introduce Jeff Carroll, Kimberly Frost, and Annie Bones. Jeff has been in the beverage alcohol industry for 15 years, and with Avalara's acquisition of Complete, became the Director of Product for Avalara's Beverage Alcohol Group. Kimberly is a partner at Martin Frost & Hill, Texas liquor lawyers. She represents wineries, distilleries, breweries, importers, and retailers in Texas and all over the country on federal and state permitting, compliance, and labeling matters. Annie is a state specialist at the Wine Institute. Annie's duties entail overseeing Wine Institute's Wine Compliance Rules website, responding to member inquiries, and works with Wine Institute's 6 state relations regional counsel and managers to address state legislation and regulatory issues affecting the wine industry outside of California. With that, I want to turn the presentation over to Jeff.
Thanks a lot, David. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is the very first webinar for Avalara for Beverage Alcohol, and we're really excited and appreciative that you are here today. We have a lot to cover, and we're going, as David mentioned, we're going to go through these topics. Really excited that Kimberly and Annie, 2 real experts in the field, could join us and drop some knowledge to the audience today. And we plan to do this again. So this first webinar is about direct shipping. We're going to mix up the topics. We hope to have webinars on a more of a quarterly basis going forward. So please look out for more information. With that, I'm going to jump right in because we have a lot to cover. And again, please type your questions into the Q&A feature, and we will dedicate some time at the end. And know that with compliance, there's generally a lot of questions, and we hope to try to answer as many as we can today. Okay, so first and foremost, who the heck is Avalara? You may be asking yourself. So Avalara is the worldwide expert in sales tax and tax compliance in general. And Complete, based in Paso Robles, California, has been doing beverage alcohol compliance for the last 21 years. And Avalara acquired Complete in January, and we rebranded Complete to Avalara for Beverage Alcohol. And so we are continuing our core services of licensing, product registrations, aka brand and label registrations, tax returns and reporting, so sales tax, excise tax, all of that. And we're really excited to add to the mix of our beverage alcohol suite real-time sales tax calculation via Avatax. Avatax is Avalara's core product, and now we can support alcohol rates within Avatax, and we're really excited to offer that real-time integration to our customers. Avatax comes with over 800 built-in connectors, and we're expanding that all the time. So that was my last commercial, one and only commercial. And so, you know, on the call today, we have people that have been in the direct shipping world for a long time and are experts in the field. We also have people that are new to direct shipping. So I thought we'd just kind of ground ourselves with a little background information before I introduce Kimberly and Annie. So U.S. wineries can ship to 46 states. This map has obviously changed tremendously since the Granholm decision of 2005. And there's only, 5 states that six states that still prohibit direct shipments. Annie's going to dig into some of those specifics. In her section, we did not add any new states to the mix this year. There was a lot of activity in the orange states, and there will certainly be more activity next year, but no new states were added to the mix. So what do we mean when we say U.S. wineries? That means that you hold a federal basic permit with TTB to produce wine, and you also hold a license in your home state to produce wine. So in California, for example, that is a type 02 permit. If you have that, you can get to, if you're under the 250,000 gallon capacity cap, especially that exists in Ohio and New Jersey still, you can get to all 46 of these states. If you have a different type of license, so for example, if you have the 1720 combination in California, you may actually be and likely are considered a retailer. And retailers have a very different map than what wineries have. As you can see, there's 16 states available to retailers as we're speaking today. This map may very well change. We are going to talk a little bit about the Tennessee Wine Retailers Supreme Court case with Kimberly, and we're going to certainly see a lot of activity next year. So look for this map to change. At the start of 2019, there were 14 states available for retailers. We did add 2 to the mix this year. Annie's going to talk about Connecticut that passed a new law and a new license system for wine retailers. Florida was also added to the map this year. There was a declaratory ruling that went in the favor of wine retailers in Florida, and that declaratory ruling was upheld. And so we have officially added Florida to the retailer map. Okay, then just really quickly, it's worth noting common carriers, FedEx and UPS, do send reports to the vast majority of states that allow direct shipping. And Texas, we're going to get into, is not the only state that's starting to take a closer look at these reports. If you remember, Michigan and Illinois and several other states have really begun to take a closer look at those reports and to dig a little bit deeper into the world of direct shipping. And so it's as important as ever to maintain compliance. Make sure you have the right licenses, pay your excise taxes and your sales taxes, follow the rules, and that helps. That helps when we're trying to pass additional favorable legislation for wineries and retailers and everybody involved. Okay, and speaking of rules, I wanted to highlight, if most of you have probably been here before, but there is a really great resource out there for to help understand the rules, the Wine Compliance Rules site. This is a collaboration between Wine Institute and Avalara, and if you click on that map right in the middle of this screenshot here, you'll see it'll take you to a state-by-state breakdown of all the rules, all of the forms, news alerts for each state, just a real wealth of information that's available. And that the DTC portion of this rules website is free and public and available to everybody. The wholesale laws piece on the left is a very similar resource that has a lot of the same information on the wholesale side, in the wholesale channel. That is for Wine Institute members only. The Wine Institute members can log into that and see the same information for the wholesale channel. And as David mentioned, in the resources feature, you'll find a link to this site and a lot of the other things that we mentioned in today's webinar. So check that out. Okay, so at this point, we're gonna get into our very first topic, Texas ABC Audits. You've probably heard about this at some point, and fortunately we have the Texas ABC expert with us today, Kimberly Frost. Kimberly, are you with us? If you could take yourself off mute.
I am here.
Hi, Kimberly.
Here. Thank you. Hi.
So I'm going to advance.
Would you like me to okay.
Yeah, I'm going to advance the slide. So what we have here is a screenshot from a blog post that we did back in September, and this is just kind of showing for those that have received a notice of audit from ABC, the list of stuff. So maybe, Kimberly, could you start by giving us a little background, what's going on, who's getting audited, and what's the motivation, and what should wineries that have yet to receive an audit expect if they get a letter like this?
Sure, absolutely. So, we've had direct shipping in Texas for many, many years, but TABC really hasn't historically done much in the way of auditing out-of-state wineries that are shipping in or anybody shipping in. And a couple of years ago, we had a pretty significant change in leadership at the agency, and over the course of the last couple of years, the leadership has been looking at things like, what rules do we need to update? Where have we not been getting out there and doing our audits and doing our inspections? And TABC acknowledged that they just haven't been in the business of auditing these direct shippers, and now was the time to get started on that. So they launched a round of audits of a big handful, a lot of California wineries, and also a lot of in-state manufacturers. So at the same time, out-of-state wineries were getting these audit requests, in-state manufacturers were getting audit requests too, which is interesting because there's only so many human beings who can manage all these requests and all these responses that are coming in. And I think that was part of the reason I think a lot of people haven't heard back yet after having submitted documents in response to an audit. I will say if you get one of these audit requests and it has a deadline for when to provide the information, it is no problem at all to contact the sender of the letter and ask for an extension. They will give you one. And you can talk to that person about the best means of providing the information. I mean, you can put it in a box and ship it if you want. You can put it all in a Dropbox and send them links. They're pretty accommodating to what works for you, and they're real flexible on extending deadlines within reason. And it's no problem at all if the request letter routed through the wrong office and it took a while to get to the keeper of the information. They understand that happens. So what I thought I'd do, Jeff, if it's okay with you, is walk through this slide of the stuff that TABC is requesting. In their form letters, everybody gets the same basic set of requests. They're all pretty closely tied to the small handful of things you have to do and get to do as an out-of-state winery direct shipper. So I thought I would go through each of the items and tell you what I think TABC is getting at and looking for in requesting these things. Of course, the first one is the report that a direct shipper is required to send in. If you're selling less than 5,000 gallons a year into Texas, you file this report quarterly. If you're selling more than 5,000 gallons a year into Texas, you're filing this report monthly, and that's it's your report, it's your excise tax return, it's the way you're paying your state excise taxes. It used to be annual, so it's been sometime in 2019 that they changed that to quarterly or monthly. The next thing they are asking for is an org chart of your owners and officers, because all permittees, direct shippers, and everybody else who's got a TABC permit has an obligation to report changes to what's been filed within 30 days of any changes. So if you've had ownership changes or officer, director, manager, member changes, all those are due to be reported within 30 days of them taking place, and people miss that deadline and don't realize that deadline's a requirement all the time. It used to be that you could file changes like that just in conjunction with a renewal, so that you might go 2 years with the change unreported. But in 2018, TABC amended its rules to make those reports changes due within 30 days. So if you get a request like this and realize that you've got changes that are unreported, I suggest that you prepare a TABC amendment and report those changes and get it filed, so that it's on file by the time you respond to the audit request. And so you respond to the audit request with what's current and accurate, and you will have by then reported the amendment to TABC so that what's on file with them is current and accurate. It takes TABC quite some time to get to those sort of supplemental amendments, so don't be surprised at all if you file something like that and don't hear anything for weeks and weeks and weeks. To TABC's credit, they're working on original applications that are to get people in business, so these supplemental changes that don't hold up anyone's business are not a high priority. Let's see, the next
so you're
item
saying, Kimberly, yeah, so you're saying on that front, so regardless if you've yet received a notice letter, since this is one of the things that they're kind of highlighting, it's a good idea to get that amendment in and process kind of separately from the response on the audit request.
Exactly.
Okay.
That way your file will be current and it'll match what you're going to report in this. I've certainly gotten questions saying, should we answer number 2 with what's on file with TABC or with what's current? Well, both. With what's current needs to be the answer to both parts of that, right? What's on file with TABC needs to be current, and what you report in response to the audit needs to be current. And if you're late, you're way past 30 days since whatever you're reporting was made effective. I have, people miss that deadline all the time, and I've never seen anybody get in trouble for missing that deadline. I think TABC just wanted to stop it being the case that changes could go 2 years without getting reporting. So the next thing is the contractor agreement for producing and bottling for you. This ties to a requirement in Texas statute that any wine that a direct shipper ships, they have to have produced or bottled themselves, which means if another winery if you are the custom crush client to another winery, you didn't produce or bottle that wine, they did. And custom crush wine made by somebody else under contract with you isn't wine that you produced or bottled yourself. So I think TABC is asking for this, and if you provide a bunch of custom crush agreements, you are demonstrating to TABC that you're selling wine into Texas that you didn't produce or bottle. So be aware that that's what they're going to look for when they see those custom crush agreements. Now, I think further down they asked for, or some of the requests, your COLAs are down there on number 7. I think they could get at that exact same issue just by asking for your COLAs, because if you bottled it, you have the COLA for it, and then they wouldn't have to get a bunch of agreements that they have to try to read and understand. But that's neither here nor there. Next is a copy of your sales tax permit, because, of course, you are to be collecting and remitting sales tax on the wine that you sell to Texas consumers, and a copy of your TTB permit, because you have to have a TTB producer blender bonded winery permit to be eligible for a TABC direct shipper permit. To Jeff's point earlier, if you if you have a different kind of wine permit in your home state, but you're not a producer blender on your TTB permit, then you're not eligible for a TABC direct shipper permit. Also not eligible if you have a Texas winery permit, because you've got a winery here in Texas. You can't be a winery in Texas and a winery in another state that's direct shipping into our state. Number 6 is copies of your invoices and shipping information for all wines shipped into Texas. That, I believe, is getting at 2 things. One, are you honoring the shipping limits, 9 gallons per 30 days to a person, 36 gallons per 12 months to a person? Also, who's bringing that in? Is it coming into Texas in a truck of somebody who holds a TABC carrier permit? Both of those elements are required, that you use a TABC permitted carrier and that you don't bust those shipping limits, and that item 6 proves up both of those things. 7, the bottling reports and COLAs. Again, that gets at, are you producing or bottling the wine you ship into Texas? From my perspective, this is the lowest hanging fruit of the stuff that's out that TABC is asking for. If they're flipping through the COLAs you sent and you're filing COLAs that aren't issued to the name and address that's on the direct shipper permit, the name and address of your winery that you got a direct shipper permit for, then you're not complying with the statute, the requirement that the direct shipper permittee bottled the wine they shipped. So if you are a person who has more than one winery in California and you're shipping wine from all those different wineries, you need direct shipper permits from all those different wineries. But the good thing about that is you get there's a total cap of 35,000 gallons a year direct to consumers, and you get that 35,000 gallons for as many direct shipper permits as you have. But TABC does expect that you have a direct shipper permit at each of your winery locations if you're shipping wine bottled at more than one of your own wineries. The request for production records, I think, is a little odd because, again, they can get at whether you're complying with the bottled the wine you shipped with your COLAs, and also production records are they're super complicated, and every winery has their own different way of keeping records. So I think TABC may discover when they get boxes and boxes of production records that those aren't really very helpful at helping them figure out whether a winery is selling in wine that it bottled itself. Because certainly the time period requested in the time period covered by the production records isn't going to relate at all to the wine that was shipped to a consumer in that time period. You're going to have shipped wine you produced in some period prior to the time period you're sending your records for. Again, the item 9, of course, the top 20 customers, that is probably getting at the shipping limits again. They're probably figuring that if there's anybody you busted the caps on, it's probably your top 20. Then finally, the last item on here is a strange one to me, because I don't know why TABC wants to see or cares about your fulfillment center agreements or your warehousing agreements, because I can't think of any grounds that they could have to object to some out-of-state winery's agreement with its in-state fulfillment house or warehouse, unless maybe they're going to look into those agreements to see if they can find anything that makes it seem like it's not just a fulfillment agreement, it's actually a custom crush agreement. But other than that, TABC has long understood that a winery might ship wine from a different address. There might be a different address on the bill of lading than the winery address because wineries use fulfillment houses. When we first adopted our direct shipper statute, there were some folks inside the agency who didn't think that was okay and expected to see the winery address on the shipping records. But they came around to understand that while that's not really the way we work in Texas because we're pretty small and unsophisticated in a lot of ways, in our industry, that is certainly the way it works in California, and they came around to that and have never had a problem with wine coming into Texas from a fulfillment center rather than directly from the winery premises. So I don't know what they're getting at looking at people's fulfillment center contracts. That's, I'm happy to answer specific questions about it, but that's kind of the lay of the land and what TABC is doing on these. I tell you, once you respond to the request, I don't recommend people call and follow up and say, do you need anything else or where do we stand? I think, the squeaky wheel gets the grease and gets the attention, and I'd say just wait and see if they get back in touch with you, because they've got a lot of documents coming in and they've got a lot of stuff to look at. It might be a long time before they get around to looking at your documents and having questions about them.
That's awesome. Thanks, Kimberly. Super helpful. We received several questions on Texas, and so we will come back to that. And during the Q&A period, it looks like there's some specific questions that we will try our best to address in the Q&A. Keep those questions coming. It really helps us kind of get organized for the Q&A feature. Kimberly, one last question. My understanding is that they're going to eventually audit all 1,500, 1,600 direct shippers. Is that your understanding? And then it sounds like they're doing it kind of in tranches of maybe 20, 30 at a time. Does that sound right to you?
That is what I'm seeing, too. I hadn't heard them say they were going to try to audit everybody. I am not surprised that they think that is their duty as an agency.
Okay. I think I had a phone call with them, and they did say that was the goal. But yeah. I mean, given the current pace, that could take several years for them to get through all of that. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you, Kimberly. We'll come back to you for the Tennessee wine stuff in a second.
Roger that.
Okay, shifting gears a little bit here. I want to do a shameless plug for Free the Grapes. And in full disclosure, I'm on the board of Free the Grapes, so I have a huge bias here. But if you are frustrated, fed up with the complications of the laws, or want to get access to new markets, this is a good way to take action. You can subscribe to the Free the Grapes email list. If you have customers in states that you can't currently access, you can get them involved to contact their representatives. And then, the big thing I wanted to highlight is the 2020 Direct-to-Consumer Wine Symposium. If you have not been to this event before, I highly recommend it. It's a really good event, January 22nd to 23rd at the Hilton Concord in Concord, California. And there will be good compliance content at the symposium. Once again, this year, Steve Gross from Wine Institute does his State of the States keynote update, and we'll do that again. Tracy Jennison, who's General Counsel at Wine Institute, does a really good session on social media compliance that I always learn a lot from every time. I/Avalara am running a panel on compliance at the symposium this year. On that one, we have Matthew Botting, General Counsel from the California ABC, and Carrie Bonington, the attorney from Pillsbury in Sacramento. So good stuff. Highly recommend it. I think it's almost sold out, so you should register quickly if you want to attend this. Okay, at this time, I'm going to check to see if Annie is off of mute and available.
I'm here.
All right. Okay, welcome, Annie. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to you. Tell us what's going on.
Well, first, I just want to say thanks to Jeff and Avalara for inviting me to participate today. Wine Institute and Avalara partnered together, I guess, for about 2-3 years now, just to provide better compliance information to wineries. Wine Institute represents wineries in California specifically, but we do our best to make compliance resources widely available to wineries throughout the country, because we do believe that the more information folks have, the easier it is for them to comply, the better it is for the industry overall. So that's been great. And I also want to thank all of you for joining us today. I know it's a busy time of year, especially with the holidays. So turning our focus to the slides. The first slide probably looks familiar. It's a map of where wineries can ship today. It's nearly all blue, as Jeff said, and most states have passed a law allowing some form of direct-to-consumer shipping. Not all of the laws are great. Some have room to be improved, like Ohio and New Jersey, which have capacity caps. But it's also important to realize where you cannot ship, and those states are Alabama, Mississippi, Kentucky, Delaware, and Utah. So just a reminder that those are the states where you hopefully do not, for the moment, have any wine club customers in them. And now before we look ahead, I thought we'd just quickly take a look back at 2019 and some of the things that happened. As Jeff mentioned, Connecticut made several legislative changes during the 2019 regular session of the Assembly to their alcohol beverage tax laws and licensing requirements. One of the big changes is that they created a new out-of-state retail shipper's permit for wine. So they officially opened up for retailer shipping on July 1st for retailers that obtained a permit. And I believe the fee is about $500, $600 with the initial licensing fee. And another change that, didn't get a lot of attention in Connecticut when the retailer shipping law passed was they also amended their current direct shipping law for wineries to prohibit the sale of wine below cost. So that's just something you should be keeping in mind if you offer discounts to consumers in Connecticut, that you cannot sell the wine below your cost to produce it. And also, unfortunately, there was an across-the-board excise tax rate increase on wine that went into effect on October 1st. So all the new forms and rates are up on the Wine Institute Compliance Rules website if you haven't seen them. Then turning to Louisiana. Louisiana does not use the federal standards of fill, so they have their own approved bottle sizes, and one part of the direct shipping law is that until this year on July 1st, they only allowed 750 milliliter size containers to be shipped directly to consumers. So SB 34, which went into effect on July 1st, changed their definition of container sizes that could be legally shipped to consumers in Louisiana. It added 1.5 liter bottles and 3 liter bottles to the approved sizes. Unfortunately, we didn't get the 375 milliliters, the splits in the bill, but we're going to keep working on adding those other sizes in the future. And then Oklahoma. Oklahoma opened up in 2018 for direct shipping. We've now just this fall completed the first full year of wineries being able to ship into the state. I guess it seems to be going well. The big problem that popped up that we weren't expecting is that the ABLE Commission is interpreting the law as to prohibit the use of the services of a fulfillment warehouse for direct shipping. So most wineries, I know all of you use fulfillment houses, and this is frustrating. We did get a bill introduced last session that made some progress that would have specifically allowed the use of fulfillment houses. Unfortunately, it did not pass. We're going to keep working on getting this fixed. But in the meantime, anyone who does hold a direct shipper permit and is shipping into Oklahoma should be doing so from their own licensed premises. Another change is that initially the Taxation Commission in Oklahoma was going to require direct shippers to post a bond, and then they decided that that wouldn't be necessary, which is good news because there's a fee involved with that, and it's a lot of extra paperwork. So that was good news. You no longer are required to have a bond in order to hold a direct shipper license for Oklahoma. And then Oregon, the only thing that changed in Oregon is that the license fees increased, and the fees had held pretty steady. Actually, they hadn't changed at all, I believe, since the initial law passed about 10 years ago. So they doubled, the fee doubled for direct shipping. It went from $50 to $100, and that went into effect on October 1st. And Oregon also allows wineries outside of Oregon to sell directly to retail accounts or self-distribute, so those fees increased as well to $200. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Certificate of Approval, that's a license that's required for selling to wholesalers in Oregon. So these fees, affected most license types, most alcoholic beverage license types in Oregon, not just direct shipping. And then, let's see, moving on to South Dakota. Some wineries I know like to offer coupons and special discounts to wine club members and to their customers. As you know, South Dakota had a rather strict law prohibiting extreme discounts or coupons. They were often considered to be inducements. Well, they went back and passed a law this year that would allow wineries to go ahead and offer just cash discounts, coupons to wine club customers without being at risk of violating the law. So now you can do a lot of those offers that previously were considered unlawful. If you have questions, you can check the regulations. You can send us your questions, and we can forward you the links, or you can check with your attorney. And then finally, what is next for direct shipping in 2020? A lot of people see the map. They see that it's all blue, and it's like, well, we can sit back and relax. We can focus on those 5 states that are still red. However, there's still a lot of work that we do just to try and maintain the status quo, and also to continue to improve the existing direct shipping laws. As Jeff mentioned, Free the Grapes, their work is very important in this process, especially when it comes to removing the capacity caps in Ohio and New Jersey that prevent wineries that produce over 250,000 gallons per year from being eligible to obtain a direct shipping permit. But other things that Wine Institute works on and looks for opportunities to improve are onerous paperwork requirements. Maybe instead of reporting every month, we're able to change it or pass a bill that would reduce the reporting requirements to quarterly or even annually. Simplifying applications. We also have been working really closely with the common carriers, FedEx and UPS, to ensure that they are able to comply with their requirements, because as Jeff mentioned when he showed you the map, they also have to file reports and often obtain licenses. So we want to make sure they can continue to transport direct-to-consumer sales into the states. And then, as Kimberly was talking about the Texas audits, for a lot of folks, this is maybe the first time they've been audited by a state or had a state request their records of any type. However, other states, have conducted audits of wineries. They do look at shipment reports, and I think we're going to see this happen more often. Maybe not the same amount of records that Texas is requesting, but it's something that is not really going to go away. I think we're going to see more of it, and we're going to see it coming from more states. Some states that have sent out enforcement letters or contacted wineries in the past year, and again, this isn't a comprehensive list, but it's just some, are Illinois, Michigan, Missouri, Nebraska, Texas, Virginia. A lot of them have also issued notices about their concerns. So we often post links to those notices on the Wine Institute Compliance Rules website. That's a great place to check for new information. And, as part of the enforcement and auditing of direct shippers, states are looking to compare your shipment reports against the common carrier shipment reports. And so this map with all different colors just kind of shows you how extensive those requirements are, and I think we're going to be seeing more of them. I think, a bunch of states have been introducing legislation that would create new carriers or new requirements on the carriers for reporting and licensing. So now, best practices, just a few reminders of some basic steps you can take that we shouldn't overlook. I guess one of the most important is age verification. So age verification is different than age affirmation. Age affirmation is when you go to a website and there'll often be a box and it will say, are you 21 or older? So that's age affirmation. Age verification is when you actually verify the age of the consumer at the time of sale. LexisNexis, Ideology are companies that offer this service, and so they will actually run a check right there before you complete the sale. And, that's something that we recommend wineries use for transactions and sales for winery to consumers in every state. There are a few states that specifically require the use of an age verification service in the statute, but really you should be using it for all of your sales. And the other thing is, make sure you hold the proper licenses. If you're working with a fulfillment house, make sure they're providing the information they need to provide to the common carriers, to the states. There are a handful of states that require the fulfillment warehouses to get approval or to file reports. And often you as the direct shipper license holder are ultimately responsible for making sure your fulfillment house is complying with those requirements. And I'd say most of them do, but it's something that you should just be aware of and make sure that if you change fulfillment houses, you update any paperwork or notify the state if it's one of the states that require you to submit such information. And lastly, working with third-party providers, just a reminder that no one else can hold a license to allow you to ship into another state that you are unable to get yourself, or that eliminates the need for you to be licensed. So no one can get the licenses for you that would allow you to continue to sell and ship wine without a license. The one exception would be if you actually sell your wine to a licensed retailer, and that licensed retailer is shipping into a state that allows retailers to ship directly to consumers. So that pretty much wraps up my part for the moment.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Annie. We got a lot of questions during your update as well, so we will come back to those. Keep the questions coming. They're really good questions, and we really hope to hit them. So we are running just a tiny bit behind schedule here, and I'm going to skip over this topic of Tennessee wine retailers and then maybe come back to it when we start the Q&A session, and just get through a few topics really quickly. So on the ADA front, this has been going on for a couple of years. Wine Institute and Complete at the time with FedEx did a road show across the state of California, and this was a real hot topic at the time about 2 years ago. So if you haven't gotten your website up to snuff with the ADA compliance rules, now is definitely the time to do so. This is a screenshot from Wine Institute's ADA compliance resource page, and they're strongly recommending that the best practice of complying with this WCAG 2.1 AA standard, even though it's not exactly clear what the rules are, that's the best practice. So make sure you're doing that. Talk to your e-commerce provider. We added a couple links to resources, Wine Institute's resource, as well as Wine Direct / Vin65's resource. They did a good job of assembling some information. So check out those links in the resource section. California Consumer Privacy Act, I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on this today, but you should be aware. I think there was a hearing this morning, and the last public hearing is tomorrow, and then the deadline for submitting comments is December 6th. If you're familiar with those annoying pop-ups that you get asking if it's okay to accept cookies, you know, the CCPA is going to be semi-similar to that, but the rules have not been finalized yet. So even though this law theoretically takes effect on Jan 1, there probably will be a grace period for compliance, and we're going to certainly provide a lot more information once these rules get finalized. And there's good guidance on how to comply with the CCPA. So this is for all California consumers. And then finally, you know, we'll talk about Tennessee wine, but there was another Supreme Court case that did have, you know, fairly significant impact on wineries. So Wayfair happened in 2018. I think this came out in May of 2018, and since then there's been a tremendous amount of legislative activity and rulemaking and lots of change. All of this happened since just last year. And so we tried to distill that down for wineries and what that means. The Wayfair case was a huge a huge deal for most businesses. And however, a little bit less so for wineries, because you are all paying sales tax as part of the requirements to get your direct shipping permit in the majority of states. A few things that I will call out that are new and confusing to some wineries. So the big change this year was in California. So if you do over $500,000 of sales in California, and that includes pretty much everything. That includes your DTC, your wholesale, your sales to retailers, all of that. Most wineries are over 500. Most California wineries, I should say, are over $500,000 in California. Then the change is you have to start collecting and remitting the local district taxes, and that is new, because in the past a lot of wineries would collect kind of a flat tax in California. So now local taxes are required, and then Colorado is, these other states kind of mostly in the beigeish color were states that otherwise wouldn't have required or otherwise don't require sales tax registration as part of the DTC statute, but pay attention to those economic nexus thresholds. So, like for example, in Colorado, if you're over $100,000 to Colorado consumers on an annual basis, then they require a registration of sales tax, and then you need to collect the state tax, the special district taxes, and the state collected local jurisdictions, but not the home rule jurisdictions necessarily. And then other states such as Minnesota and Iowa and DC, also have economic thresholds. There's a link to Avalara's Economic Nexus and Wayfair resource page in the resource links that's super helpful and has a lot of those that has details on all of the different state requirements there. Okay, so with that, I'm going to start with the Tennessee. Kimberly, are you still there? Can you take yourself off of mute?
I am here.
Awesome. So let's start with Tennessee wine. It's a lot of confusion for people about what did it mean exactly. Give us like 1 minute, if you could. I thought this NPR headline was kind of funny, and following the news was funny. A lot of people are trying to sort out like what does it mean and what should we expect, and would you classify it as a nothing burger, a impossible burger, or a double cheeseburger?
I would say that on the residency issue, what was at issue in the case, it was not surprising at all. This case is a very conventional residency requirement analysis. Many states' residency requirements had already been litigated and lost. The Eighth Circuit got it wrong a couple of years ago, which is why we finally had a split in the circuits to even get this issue to the U.S. Supreme Court. So the residency question was really not very surprising. And then the issue of residency of an owner of a company that's going to apply for a permit, really isn't analogous and doesn't give us any insight into what a court would think about a physical premises requirement, right? Which is what we're talking about when we're talking about retailer direct shipping. Can you retail to consumers without a physical premises? And whether you don't have to live in the state to own a company that holds a permit really isn't on all fours at all with whether you have to be in the state to be a retailer. I think what's interesting about this case is that it breathes new life into this jurisprudence. There were a few retailer direct shipping cases 10 years ago that just fizzled and nothing interesting happened. We had one in Texas. And this case sort of articulates a new standard because it's not just a plain old rational basis test for whether a state law prohibiting out-of-state retailer direct shipping has a rational basis, because it's very difficult for a plaintiff to prevail on a rational basis standard, because basically it's any reason you could think of for why the law might be illegitimate is enough to sustain a rational basis test. The court suggests that there's going to be some kind of evidence required that the rule or that the restriction advances a legitimate government interest. And so what is that evidence going to be? Is a state, are folks going to be able to gin up surveys or data that shows that more wine or alcoholic beverages get shipped to minors from out of state than they're able to buy across the counter in state? I don't know. Would a state put on evidence that it literally is incapable of regulating the whole country's worth of outlets? And it can manage its in-state brick and mortar stores, but if you open up the whole country, the state is incapable of regulating. Would a state say that about itself? And would that be sufficient evidence that there's a legitimate reason not to let out-of-state retailers ship? I mean, I think that's the question, and that's what's going to happen over the next few years, is people trying to figure out a way to build an evidentiary case for and against these laws. And until somebody can do that, they're going to keep losing. The challengers are going to keep losing.
I think it's going to be really interesting, and I think you're going to see a ton of legislation next year. And there's already a ton of litigation. What do we have cases in 7 states or more at this point that are looking at this question of retailer to consumer shipping? I personally think that map is going to change, and it's going to be really fascinating to watch over the next couple of years.
There certainly are folks who feel like if a state allows an in-state retailer to deliver across the street, then it loses on out-of-state in shipping in. I don't know. I think a state could put on compelling evidence that it does not have the resources to regulate the whole country and, in fact, the whole world shipping in.
Okay.
And so we'll see.
Cool. So let's go. I think we got a couple Texas questions here. Let me throw a couple at you real quick. Kimberly, can you ship wine into Texas? Can you ship wine into Texas that you produced but did not bottle? We often have other wineries bottle for us wine we produced.
Yeah, our statute says that the direct shipper permittee has to have produced or bottled the wine. So if you don't own the cola because somebody else bottled it for you, then you need to have production records that very directly connect the dots between this production and that bottle, so that because it's not as easy to prove up, it's just having the cola.
Cool. Similarly, if you are a custom crush facility and have alternating proprietor agreements with wineries, are they still able to use the produced and bottled by on their label and direct ship to Texas?
Well, I mean, if you have if a person is an alternating proprietor tenant such that they have their own TTB and state permit at a plant, then that holder of that TTB and TABC permit as an alternating proprietor is eligible for a TABC direct shipper, and its labels can say produced and bottled by if that was produced under the authority of their permits and they reported its TTB, and got their own cola and all that. But a custom crush customer is not an AP winery. And I think sometimes people get about that.
Okay. Annie, I hope you're with us. I'm not sure if you have an update here. We got several questions about the CBMA, the Craft Beverage Modernization Act. Those cuts are going to, the federal excise tax changes are set to expire at the end of the year. Do we have any updates on what's going to happen there, or is it going to come down to the wire?
Unfortunately, it may come down to the wire. I mean, we're in December now. I can tell you that our Washington, D.C. team this is pretty much their top priority. They are working on it and working with a coalition of other industry members to do everything they can to get it passed this year. It's very difficult to predict what Congress will do these days, or to say that something is certain. But you're welcome to reach out to me. A-Bones offline, I'll put you in touch with our DC office because they can give you a more detailed update of what the status is.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to predict. I mean, it does seem like there's pretty broad bipartisan support for extending the cuts, but at the same time, Congress is very unpredictable these days, so it is really hard to tell what's going to happen here, and we'll see. It's going to probably come down to the wire. All right, Annie, let's see. Here we go. On Wine Institute's website, it shows that Arkansas and Rhode Island are still prohibited for DTC, but on the map shown in this slideshow, those states are open. Could you provide an update on Arkansas and Rhode Island, please?
Sure. So I agree. It is a little confusing, and actually we want to kind of clarify what the map on the website represents. And that represents all the states that allow wineries to ship both on-site sales and off-site direct-to-consumer sales. So Rhode Island and Arkansas are listed as prohibited on the website because they only allow shipments to a consumer who purchases wine during a visit to the winery. So they're not eligible to join a wine club. We are trying to fix those laws and to pass like a traditional direct shipping law based on our model bill legislation. So we're going to keep moving forward with those efforts, but in the meantime, you can only ship to a customer who purchases that wine while visiting your winery.
Yeah, we used to have two separate maps, one for off-site sales, and that really is what we're showing when we show all that blue, and then one separately for on-site sales. That kind of that distinction has become less and less relevant. Those are the two states where it does still matter, so it is a little bit tricky to show those. But yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Let's see. Kimberly, what type of details is Texas? Oh, by the way, we are at the top of the hour. Obviously, feel free to drop off if you have other places to go. I think we'll answer 2-3 more questions. And if we didn't get to your questions, we'll certainly try to get to you via email and answer your questions, and happy to continue the conversation. This has been great. We've had a lot of great questions. We're not going to get to all of them today, but we'll do a few more. Kimberly, what type of details is TABC looking for when they request production records?
You know, I don't think they know because they don't get production records routinely from in-state wineries or out-of-state wineries. I mean, a TABC a winery in Texas files a monthly report that's just bottled wine in and out. It's not a production report. So I don't think they really know. They definitely have not articulated a standard. So I think you just have to provide whatever you have in the way of production records, and I think they are probably finding out, you know, from me talking to my winery clients that are submitting documents, you know, every winery has a different way. You know, it's not all the same. Mm-hmm. I did see a response that somebody got from TABC to this question, and it seemed to me that the kinds of things they were asking for are the kinds of things that the federal distillery regs require you to have in your bottling records. So I thought that was kind of weird. So I don't know. I think I think they might understand more what they're looking for on that point as they get stuff from people, what's out there.
Yes. Speaking of learning as we go here, Annie, do you have any? I know that Tyler Rudd has been in contact with TABC and they've had conversations about the process. Is there anything, any updates on that front?
Well, I would just like to add that, you know, Tyler Rudd, he's our Central States Counsel. He's based in Austin. He knows Kimberly well. But if you're a Wine Institute member especially, and you have feedback on the audit process or suggestions, please get in touch with me or with Tyler, and we're going to try to consolidate that information and provide it to the TABC on behalf of our members. We don't know if they'll take any actions based on that, but
yeah, in my conversations with TABC, it does seem like they're open to feedback, that they're receptive, mm-hmm. that they're kind of learning as they're going here and open to feedback. So we'll keep everybody informed if the process changes here at all.
Right, and we can keep your identity confidential, like so we'll just submit it under Wine Institute.
Sure. Kimberly, staying on Texas here, lots of questions. Have you seen any penalties assessed or any enforcement actions imposed as a result of audit submissions? What is TABC doing if the audit documents establish compliance issues, such as exceeding volume limits, reports not being timely filed, etc.?
Well, we haven't seen any results of this current round of direct shipper audits, and there haven't been other direct shipper audits to speak of. But what we see when an in-state manufacturer gets audited, they'll go back and check their returns, and if they find overages, you paid too much or you paid too little, generally they'll either give you that money back or say, hey, write us a check for what you owe us. I don't see a lot in the way of enforcement actions coming out of audits. I mean, I really do think they see it as a way of bringing you into compliance and making you correct things so that you get it right going forward. I mean, if you underpaid some taxes, they'll make you pay it back. But I've had some pretty sort of, some folks are unsophisticated, so their operations are kind of a mess, and their records are kind of a mess, and even those folks who it's kind of hard to tell how much they owe or what they've been paying or whether they paid enough, even those folks aren't getting in big trouble. They're just, TABC is helping them get in order so that they can be in compliance. Historically,
Got it.
anyway.
Okay, I think maybe one more question. So, Annie, I'll send this one to you because I know you are familiar with Pennsylvania. So if I don't have a permit to ship to Pennsylvania, for example, and I take the package to a third-party shipper, are you saying they can't legally ship for me unless I sell them the wine?
Correct. And if that third-party shipper, most third-party shippers are not licensees. Their fulfillment warehouse doesn't have the ability in California to sell wine. They can only store wine on behalf of a licensee, such as a winery, a wholesaler, retailers. So that, the whole third-party shippers that are moving things into states without licenses, that's a problem. It's one of the things that the states are concerned with. You as a winery should be concerned with it because it makes it harder for us to continue to open up states and pass laws. But you should not be, without the proper permits, you should not be shipping any wine or selling wine to consumers in those states.
Yeah, I brought up that.
I would just chime in to say that. I see that all the time with winery clients calling me to say, hey, these people said they hold all the permits and they can ship for me. Oh.
Right.
They're taking people's money.
Yep. And you hold a license. You hold a winery license. You worked really hard to get that. You invested, it's your company, it's your business. You don't want to risk that by a few shipments or directing people to unlicensed third parties or working with them. The TTB has said on several occasions and put in writing that, your ability to maintain and keep your federal permit requires you to comply with state laws and state shipping laws.
Awesome. Well, Annie, Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us today. That was super informative. I really appreciate it. And at this time, we're going to conclude. I'm going to turn it over back to David. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us today.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Just some final reminders. We'll be sending the recording of this within 24 hours, so check your email for that. This is also a very hefty topic. We have a lot of questions we haven't gotten to as well. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the blue button at the bottom of the screen, and it'll send me an email. I'll be in touch with the right people to answer your question. Do not feel you need to send the same question you sent to Jeff and team before we have that list, and we will get to those as soon as we can. As well, a survey will pop at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate your feedback on what you thought of today's webinar and even your ideas for future topics you'd like to hear us cover. So what you tell us guides the content we create. So please share your ideas and what would be most valuable to you. So thanks again for attending, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day.